Hello. This week I'm looking at building some trenches and some machine gun placements. So basically what I've done is I've took out a squad of men. I'm thinking probably the biggest I'm going to run to these is probably a 10-man squad. And I wanted it to be a bit flexible. The MMGs and the mortars, they're just going to sit inside this square. Let me zoom in a bit. I'm happy for them to just sit in that section like that. But as I say, I may cut out the entire square and then I shall just build up the barrier on this bit. This is just really to make sure that I don't do anything silly and, you know, underscale it and then find I can't get it in very well. Now with the trench systems, I'm going to make them, because obviously they're sitting on the surface, so I'm going to make them look like trenches on the inside. So I'm going to be using some coffee stirrers on the inside, but then I'm going to build it up with foam and use that as like an earth mound coming up to it. So if you turn it that way around, you know, where the soldiers are, from the inside it's going to look like a trench system. And I'm also thinking of putting some coffee stirrer boards down like you'd get in the bottom of a trench system. But the reason why I've gone for it like that is I wanted to make it so I can get obviously the second batch of 5 behind it and have room for that. And what I'll probably do is, like I say, I'll build the board system for the whole of the internal section of it. So I've got 4 of them, got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to go for the machine gun or mortar placements. I'm just going to do 3, and I might do the machine gun placements a bit different. It might be that I'll just build sandbag walls or whatever. I'm not really thought about how I'm going to do that yet, but certainly on these 4 I'm going to be looking to build like an open-ended trench. But obviously, as I said, although it'll look like a trench from the inside, I'll leave this bit open so they just go into it, just advance into the trench. Because otherwise I think it'd be too cumbersome on the table. Whether I'd use all of these all at once anyway is debatable, but I'm going to make the 4 because it's as easy to do them in a batch as it is to do them individually. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this outside and run an electric saw around the basic square shapes that I've got, like that. And this is just there for the marking of where I put the foam up to, you know, so I'm not cutting any of that. They are essentially just rectangles that I'm cutting out, but I just wanted this plan on it so I could see, you know, what I was building to. Right, let me get them cut and then I'll bring you back and we'll look at the next stage. Now that I've cut them out, all I'm doing now is just I've chamfered off the edges, look, and then I'm just sanding it down to get a smoother transition. Do this with all the edges like you do with any scatter terrain really. Right, let's zoom out. Right, so I've got me 3 machine gun or mortar placements that I'm going to use, and then my 4 trench pieces, and they've all been smoothed down and chamfered off now. So all I need to do now is tidy up all this, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Right, so I've cut all my baseboards and chamfered them all now and sanded them down a bit. So now what I've done is I've gathered some really tatty looking bits of blue foam that I've got hanging around that were left over from a project, and rather than throwing it away, I've kept it. And I thought it'd come in handy for this job because I only need fractions of it and I'm going to be cutting into that anyway. So what I'm going to be looking to do is cut some pieces that can go on to form the main shape, and then I'm going to carve them down to look more like slopes of soil, so they're not too uniform. So I'm not going to be using the wire cutter on this. I'm going to do it with knives. And I'm going to be doing a similar effect on all of these. So let me get them cut and then I'll bring you back. Right, so as you can see, I've cut the foam to the right size now. It's not fixed down or anything. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do most of the carving to get it near to where I want it. And then I'm going to stick it down and I shall finish off and, you know, shape together the parts a bit better once they've glued in place. So let me put these to one side and I'll bring one back and show you. Right, so I'm going to start on this one, and basically I know if I put a little mark here, because I know that's where that one's going to slope down. But it's also got to slope in both ways on this one. Some of that I'm going to finish off as we get to it. Right, so I'm going to start with this bit and I'm going to start to shape this down. Right, so now I need to shave it down this way. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to take a slither off the top. But again, I can straighten this up later on when I've got everything in place. Right, so that bit's forming that. So now I've got to do this one to match it. Just take your time with it. As I say, we're gonna be finishing it off once it's in place, but you can see that roughly matches. So I'm going to carry on doing that around this one, and then when I've got it to, you know, the rough pattern of where I want it, I'll bring you back. Right, so that's the basic shape. Don't worry about it, you know, hanging off a bit, because we're going to shape that once it's glued in place. The fact of it is, we'll have got the most of it off, and so it's going to be a matter of just shaping it, which is going to be a lot easier once it's fixed in place. So that's all I'm trying to do at the moment, is just get it to the right size on the board. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through all of these and do the same thing. And then when I get them all to this level, we'll start gluing them in place, and then we're going to leave them to dry for a bit, and then we can come back and finish them off. Right, I'll get the rest of these done and then I'll bring you back at the next stage. Right, so now that I've cut all these to shape, I'm going to start the process of gluing them down now. And I'm using some strong PVA or wood glue. I'm just going to paste it. I don't want to do it too thick, but at the same time I want to make sure it's thoroughly coated. them out of the way a minute. Just press that down into place. We're going to weigh it down while it's drying, but first of all I want to get these in place. I'm just going to put that on the top and weigh it down. What I'll do is with each one I'll put them on top of each other as I've done them. Right, let me get the rest of these glued, and then when they're dry I'll bring you back. Right, so I've smoothed them all down now. You know, blended all the corners in. Got it, sanded it down to the height that I need it. And all I'm doing now is I'm going to seal them, and I've just used some ordinary brown paint. I've mixed it with a little bit of sand and some Mod Podge. Normally I'd paint this on and then start putting scatter on it, but because I want to do the inner parts, I'm not going to bother this time. I'm going to paint the glue on afterwards and then do that once I've got the boards in place. Right, so all I'm doing is just painting all of it, really, so it's all had a coat. Because the last thing you want is any of that blue showing through, you know, when you've added all your effects to it. So this is going to make sure that none of that shows, not even between the boards. Alright, so that's looking like that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that to the rest of them now off camera, and then I'll bring you back for the next stage. Right, so now that these are dry, I'm using these coffee stirrers to build like the plank system inside, to give it that trench look. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking the ends off, putting it in place, marking it off, and then cutting it. So that'll be like the first plank in that line. Just cut the angle off where I've cut it. Hold the next one up. Draw a little line. You don't want these two exact because they wouldn't have been. They're serving a purpose. They're not trying to win a competition for the neatest woodwork. Put that one back on top for a minute. It's fiddly, but it's worth it. Right. Top one on. So that'll be that side, and obviously what I'm going to do then is cut the same for the other side. When it comes to the length, obviously you've got to make sure it's got the clearance of the wood on either side, so it's a bit shorter than the actual gap, to allow that to go in. Right, I'll get the rest of them cut and then I'll bring you back at the next stage. Right, so the next thing we need to do is to cut the upright posts. that are holding these in place. So I've just measured on the actual thing itself for the height, and then mark that off down this square post. And then all I'm doing is I'm using this saw. If you haven't got one of these, you should definitely get one. Probably one of the most useful tools I ever bought. I'll just get that one out, show it you. So there's the little post, look. Because what I want to do is I want to build these up and then paint them before I glue them in place, because it'll be a lot easier painting them that way. And that's it. So that's got me 12 posts out of that, and that's only half a skewer. So right, I'm going to clear up a bit and pull these together, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Right, so when it comes to putting these together, the grid on your cutting mat is probably your best friend if you've got one, because it helps you line up the posts at equal gaps. And basically, as you can see, the two side ones have got 2 each on, and the same with the back. But where the side meets the back, there'll be this third post that I'm going to keep separate that will be connecting that and that at the same time. But you'll see that when I put them in place. Now I would normally use PVA on this, but for just ease of quickness, because obviously it is quite fiddly and it's prone to want to move, I'm just going to go with some super glue. Make sure you've got it lined up with the bottom, because you don't want it sitting tall. Alright, so that's them done. And then basically all I'm going to do, I'll just show you briefly before. I paint it. And that looks like that. And now what you do is when they're fixed in place, you put this final one and then one in that corner, and that makes it complete. But obviously before I do put those in place, I'm going to paint them up. Alright, I'll get that done for the rest of them now, and I'll get them in place. Well, what I'll do is I'll get them painted and then get them in place and then bring you back for the next bit. Right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to build the baseboard to go in here that the soldiers stand on. And basically I'm having 3 cross beams, and then the short pieces are going to run from front to back along these. So what I've done is I've just made sure that the long pieces that are supporting it are no longer than the gap between the 2 poles, because otherwise it won't sit down. So there will be like a little gutter gap around the side, which is pretty much how it should have been, to let the water flow away. And then what I'm going to do is I've cut these pieces to the right size, and I'm going to go along here gluing them in place. Now it's going to be a bit fiddly, so again I'm going to be using super glue and I'm going to try and get this first one in place, and then I can just follow it along. So I'm going to put a little blob of glue on the end. Right, I'll try and hold these without moving them, preferably. And I want the front piece to be flush so it looks neat when it's sticking out. Oh, it's starting to move. Let me get that back. That's right. Once you've got one fixed, it's a lot easier then. I'll leave that a few seconds just to go off. Yeah, that's fine. Right, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a few at a time so that the glue don't dry. If some of them are a tiny bit longer, it doesn't matter because we can clip them at the end. But I have tried to make them the same shape, but sawing them when they're in a stack, you do get a few discrepancies. That's it. As you can see, there's a few that have not come out quite right, and all I'm going to do is snip them off. This will give me a nice sweeping job at the end, won't it? I'm trying to find all these little bits. There we go. It doesn't have to be exact anyway, but I've neatened that bit up. And then basically, obviously when these are tightly in place, that'll sit in there like that. So basically all it's a matter of now is doing that for the rest of them, and then we can take all these bits back out and paint them up and then glue them in place. So right, I'll crack on and get the rest of these up to the same level, and then I'll bring you back. Right, so now that I've built all of these up, I'm going to be painting them with my usual favourite for this kind of thing, Vallejo Old Wood. And I need to coat both sides, so I'm just going to start with one side obviously, and then I'll just put a bit more in there. There we go. I'm going to put it on too thick anyways, just to give it the look. I might add a wash later on. I'll see how it dries. Right, well I'll crack on with the rest of these, get them all done, and then I'll bring you back for the next stage. So now that they're all painted, I'm going to start gluing these in place. And I'm going to put the side and the back panels in first. Right. And on the back one. Put it this way. Right, now we can put the base into it. Yeah, I'll have it that way. And that's it. Not going to worry about the bits of glue because they'll just dry off anyway. And when I come to do the rest of it, I'm going to sprinkle some stuff down into that as well. Alright, so that's that one. So we'll leave that one to dry. I'll go through these and then I'll do the bigger ones, and when they're dry I'll bring you back. You know, it's just occurred to me I didn't put these posts in and show you. So all I'm doing is just dragging a bit of glue up in the corner there so it catches both boards. them into place with my tweezers. There we go. Whoops. That's it now. So they're in place. Alright, I'll let that dry and now I'll carry on and I'll bring you back. Right, so what you're looking at here is my collection of sandbags. Some of these, like the flat ones, I bought on a sprue from eBay, but most of these I've made from Milliput. Some of these were also on a sprue like these, but then others I've made up using sandbags that I'd made. And what I've done off camera is I've undercoated all of these and then I've painted them with some Army Painter Banshee Brown, just to bring them to more like you'd expect the colour to be. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on these around the actual rim. I'll start with this one. Get myself a brush. Oh, this one will do. Right, so we'll start with this one. And all I'm going to do is I've got some really neat PVA and I'm going to paint it along here to put these on. Right. Over a bit. I can use a variety of these, you know. I'm going to leave some with bigger gaps in as well. You know, like that bit there where it's kind of slightly lower, just to give it a bit more character. Alright, so that's what it's looking like. And just grab one of me tester. You can just see his head poking above the top there, look. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to carry on. I'm going to do this to all of them and then I'll bring you back. So as I'm going to have to wait a long time for the sandbags to set, I thought it might be worthwhile, you know, if I'm going to wait, why not get the scatter done on the front of these as well. So what I've done is I've gone through and made a real mixture of different types of texture. I've put some of my own soil mix in here. I have put some bits of green, although you can't see it, but it does add to the texture. And I've also got tea leaves in here. I've got some fine stones. Basically, I'm just trying to make it look more like a soil that's been, you know, dug over, really, you know, and tipped out to make the trench. So what I'm going to do is, I'll just grab one of them. I've got some basing glue now, and I'm just going to paint this all over the front and the sides. Obviously, once I've done this to them all, you know, I'm going to have to allow quite a bit of drying time then. But that's not a problem. You can always start on something else while you're waiting. I'm not going to bother pouring it along this edge. Don't think there's any real need for that. I mean, if you want to, you can. What I have done is I have put a little bit on the inside here to spill out underneath. Any that sticks to the sandbags, you can just brush it off as it's starting to dry. Right. I'll just sprinkle it on. As I say, you can't see much of the green that I've put in there, but it has changed the texture of it. And the other thing is, when it comes to spraying a sealant on this later on when it's dry, it may well reveal a bit of that green anyway. And if it does, that's fine. If it doesn't, I'm happy with what I've got anyway. That's it. There's a bit missing there, look. Right, so I'll crack on, get the rest of these done to that level, and then when they're dry I'll bring you back and we can look at doing some finishing touches to it. Right, I've had a little bit of a change of mind here because originally I wanted to have some soil around these gaps, so I think I will now coat this part as well. But initially I just want to get some glue down these gaps. As you can hear, I've got my dogs with me. If you can hear all that scratching and mooching around that's going on. Use a bigger brush for the next bit. The front. that's better. Yeah, so as you can see now, it looks more realistic, because initially I didn't think I needed it on there, but I certainly needed it down these gaps. But I think, to be honest, it works a lot better having it all around it. Yeah, I'm a lot happier with that. And any that's on here, you know, it's going to add to the weathering of these boards as well, so I'm quite happy with that effect. Right, so I'm going to crack on now and get the rest of them done like that, and then we'll just leave them to dry. Now, after I've sprayed and sealed them, and it's, well, almost totally dry now, one of the final measures is I've mixed some strong tone with equal parts of the wash mix medium to make it quite gentle, and I'm just going to paste this over the sandbags just to give them a bit more definition. Because I don't want it to pool and look too dark, so that's why I've mixed it with the medium. If it pulls too much to your liking, you can always just drag it round a little bit more, which is what I'm doing on these. I mean, when it comes to you know, finishing these off, there's a lot of things that you could do, but I'm going to leave these as just working pieces, really, you know, that are just going to stand up to regular gaming. I mean, what I mean by dressing it up, you could put ammunition boxes in there, or you could paint a few rifles up and lean them against the fence, things like that. But on this occasion I'm not going to bother. I just want it to be a functional piece of terrain with nothing fancy. Just want it to do its job. But it, you know, it is something worth thinking about. I mean, if you put it in a position that's out of the way, it's not going to hurt, and it, you know, just gives it that extra layer of finish. Helps bring it alive. So that's what the sandbags are looking like now. It's not a massive difference, it's quite subtle, but it will add to the effect at the end once it's dried. The other thing that I'm contemplating doing is actually doing a little bit of it on the woodwork as well, to bring out the texture on the wood. So just using the same stuff, really. Just paint a bit and show you, and you'll be able to see that how it's brought the grain out a bit more. It's actually kind of giving it quite a good muddy look where it's mixing with some of the materials, so glad I did it. It's funny how you come across new techniques by just experimenting, and you think, oh, yeah, that works. There you go, look. Just brings that wood to life a bit, doesn't it? And now essentially all I'm going to be doing with this is letting it dry. Once it's thoroughly dry, I'll give it a matte varnish just to seal everything in, and that'll be it complete. So I'll get the rest of these done, let them dry, get the varnishing done, and then I'll bring them back and we can have a look at them and you know, set them up with a few figures or something so we can see what they look like. Right, back in a minute. Right, so they're complete. The wash dried, and I've given them a spray of matte varnish just to seal everything in. So they're ready to use now. As I say, you could dress them up if you wanted to. You could have boxes of ammunition, a few rifles leaning against the side, or even a Panzerfaust or something like that. But I'm going to just keep these practical and, you know, just as they are, you know, so that'll cover me well for what I need them for. What I'll do now is I'll just set a few up with a few figures on, just so you can, you know, have a look at what they might look like in action. And then we'll wrap this one up. Right, so they're all done. And on the whole, I'm pretty pleased with them. They're going to be ideal for my D-Day landings at the top of the hill. But I'm sure they'll come in a variety of places, really. Plenty of room for your MMGs, your mortars and 10 figures. So, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found something useful. It might give you ideas for how you want to build something like this. And if you have enjoyed it, please consider giving me a thumbs up. And maybe even subscribing for when the next video drops. Any questions, please do drop them below. I always answer. Right, thanks for your company, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.